Hey guys, I'm live for my Friday Q&A. I know that I didn't really announce it, so I'm hoping that some of you will join. And if not, I'm just going to discuss some things that I've been wanting to talk about on stories and haven't gotten around to yet. And if some people join, that's great. And I know you guys will watch this replay later because you guys always tend to watch lives, whether it's at this time. Oh, thank you guys for joining me. I wasn't sure if everyone was going to join because I know I do a Friday live at 9 every week, but I didn't announce it this week, and so I was like, oh, shoot, I didn't give you guys the heads up. So this is the regular Friday Q&A. I know I've gone live too many times this week already, but sometimes it's just an easy thing for me to do. When I can't prepare, I don't have time to sit down and actually record a story. I can just sit down and answer questions and talk about some topics with you guys. So thank you so much for joining me. I'm so glad that you're here. So ask whatever questions you want. I kind of want to do a little explanation about ketosis a little bit more and low carb eating, because so many of you guys are asking why that could be damaging, and it's such a fad right now. And you have to understand, you guys, diets don't work because restriction just never works for the body. Whenever you cut out major food groups, you do get big results because it does cause a hormonal shift, right? And this could be a good thing or a bad thing. And we automatically in our society think that weight loss automatically equals good, right? We have kind of been culturally programmed to believe that any type of weight loss is good weight loss. But good weight loss really happens when your body's sustainably opening up the fat cells and burning that glucose in the amount that it wants to do that. And when you force that to happen, it could actually end up being more than your body is prepared to handle. When we rapidly open up the fat cells using adrenaline or stress hormones, we're actually forcing our body to burn things as in a way that it wouldn't want to do. Okay, I'm starting to get some questions. Do you know what causes lines in the nails? Yeah, a lot of people say that's nutrient deficiencies, and I think it is. It can cause weakness in the nails. Some people do get some kind of nail that's damaged, they'll get their nail hit or their nail will fall off at one point in their life and they'll always have a line. I have that on my pinky, and it's just it's from damage. But if that's a pattern and a lot of your nails have actual lines, or they're rough, or they're just not healthy looking, that can definitely be a sign of nutrient deficiencies. Usually it has a lot to do with either minerals or B vitamins, but sometimes it can be other nutrient deficiencies as well. But those are the ones that you commonly see with lines in the nails. Hi Jessica, thank you for always doing these Insta lives. Oh, thank you for being here. I love to go live with you guys because honestly, some weeks I'm just really pressed for time, and so it's easy for me to just jump on and go live with you guys. And sometimes recording stories are not as time efficient for me. Okay, so what if some of us don't see eating high fat, low carb as a fad? Right. No, that is a wonderful question. So I'm not actually saying that it's a fad for you. A lot of people have taken on that lifestyle. What I'm saying though is it's fairly recent. And so most women that I know that are on keto have only been on keto for 1 or 2 years, maybe, if that, because it just began to become a lot more popular in recent times, right? Before then, it was something that people did, but it wasn't as popular. And so what I'm saying is that it's really hard to know if a diet is sustainable for you hormonally. I'm not talking sustainable for you you enjoy doing high fat, low carb. I'm talking about sustainable hormonally long term until you actually do it. And what I find is so many women don't realize that it sometimes takes time for hormonal dysregulation to happen. It doesn't just happen when you switch to a diet. Many times when we go on a very restrictive diet at first, we feel really good. And keto can make us feel really good. It's really not the blood sugar that is the benefit that comes with keto. It's actually that a lot of people have gut issues. And so when you restrict starch and you restrict sugar, you immediately start starving certain bacteria in your digestive tract that would be giving off something called LPS, or lipopolysaccharides, also called endotoxins. Endotoxins are known to cause inflammation in the cell and cause them to become insulin resistant or not able to burn glucose properly. And so when we remove starches and sugars, we do remove the stress that comes from feeding bacteria that are going to create these inflammatory substances. But what we're not realizing is in doing that, in starving that bacteria, we're actually starving our cells of what they need, which is glucose. And so this can maybe result in the first year or two feeling really incredible, energized, because we've probably been living with a lot of endotoxins or LPS in our lives for a long time. And so that's why a lot of people on keto or carnivore do see symptoms improve. But there's a difference between a diet that heals your metabolism and a diet that suppresses your symptoms and suppresses your metabolism. And this is why I break down the science in Fully Nourished. But really, a keto or even a paleo diet or a low carb diet is a symptom suppressing diet. It just removes the glucose and it removes your body's need to secrete a lot of insulin, and it also starves the gut bacteria which were causing the problem. But that doesn't fix the problem that your body wasn't burning glucose efficiently in the first place. So you would actually get long-term, more lasting results if you dealt with the bacteria in your gut and got your gut high functioning, and then was able to actually process starches and carbohydrates properly so that your cells could get the fuel that they prefer and burn fuel optimally. So there's a difference, and I always say that if you feel good doing something and it's sustainable for you and it doesn't implement any kind of food fear or any relational damage in your life, so you are not afraid to go eat out at restaurants, you're not afraid of carbs, if you eat a carb, you move on, there's no guilt or shame involved, then that is not... then it's probably a sustainable lifestyle for you. But a lot of women don't realize when they're on keto diet, they've actually developed orthorexia, or they've developed a fear of foods. They've decided that carbs are bad and blah, blah, blah is good. And they've decided that in their mind. But what you have to understand is that's scientifically wrong. That's not the correct thing. And so in restricting things that our body needs and giving it something else, for example, when you crave sugar, you probably give yourself stevia or monk fruit or some other artificial sweetener. What can happen is your body's literally telling you, your body has biological response to tell you what you need nutrient-wise. So when you crave sugar, your body does need sugar. It's not like your body's like lying to you like, oh, I really need fat. No, your body's actually telling you, hey girl, I need some sugar and I need it now. And when you give your body stevia or you give your body monk fruit, you're not giving it what it needs. And so it begins to have to compensate for that. And over time, this compensation leads to more and more problems. For example, you have to raise cortisol, you have to raise adrenaline, and you have to start breaking down your tissues in order to make sugar, since you're not giving your body sugar. And so this leads to the stress response over time. And this is why at the 2-year mark or the 3-year mark, we start to see women just break down. Their thyroid has just been trashed. Their T3 levels are very low because T4 can't convert to T3 in the liver without glucose. And so it takes a while to do this. And I just want to, and this is just something that I observe amongst women who have been on keto, 3-4 years. A lot of times in our culture, we equate leanness with health, right? We equate abs with health. This is a societal concept. This is not biological fact. Leanness does not equal health. And many times, if you look at a woman that is super duper lean, you look at her face and she has slight dark circles. She has a sallow face. She doesn't have a full, vital looking body. You should always have a layer of fat over your whole body. Women are supposed to have a certain amount of body fat percentage in order to optimally function. And so, if we're equating leanness with health, is a woman who's done keto for 3 years, who's super duper lean and her skin is, almost sallow looking and she has dark circles under her eyes, is that really health? Or is that our idea and that society has programmed into us of health? And so there's a very big difference between biological health and actual health. And our society has it very wrong. And so a lot of times we're like, well, that woman has done keto for 3 or 4 years and she's doing incredible, right? But then she comes to me and she's like, hey, Jessica, I haven't had my period in 2 years. And I'm like, seriously? So I've had so many cases of these I work with a lot of other people in the health and wellness community. It's just a funny thing. Like, people are like, you're the nutritionist of nutritionists. And it just happened out that way. A lot of nutritionists and health and wellness people in my industry are now coming to me as clients. And they're teaching their people something that's not working for them. And so then I have to help them heal, and then they have to completely like revamp their career. And so a lot of times, sometimes people are so connected to a belief system, or it's going to cost them too much to change what they teach, even if they learn that something else is better. And so, you know, this is just all me to say is that if keto is a lifestyle for you and you love it and you can sustain it long term and you're not hormonally disrupted, go on with your bad self. I just want you feeling really, really good. What would help getting rid of hirsutism? Hirsutism is usually caused by either high prolactin or high stress hormones. A lot of people say it's due to high levels of testosterone and DHT, but I started to see a pattern that women that had high DHT and testosterone also had high levels of prolactin and cortisol. And then there were women coming to me with hirsutism that didn't have high androgens at all. No high DHEA, no high testosterone. So what was the explanation for that? And so I started to realize a pattern that a lot of women that have hirsutism, it's not actually testosterone that's driving it, even though that's what mainstream medicine will say. It's actually stress hormones that are driving it. So you want to lower stress in the body. You want to lower inflammation in the body. You want to... you know, if you're, and when I say lower stress, like a lot of people get confused. They're like, well, I'm not that stressed, Jessica. And I'm like, are you in a relationship where that partner treats you like shit? Are you at a job that you literally hate and you can't go outside at all? Are you in an environment that's toxic, meaning that you have chemicals in your environment, you're using toxic cleaning products, hygiene products, etc. Like there's toxins everywhere in your food and in your water and in your products that you put on your skin. You know, so those are all small stressors that can actually really drive stress hormones. So when I talk about lowering stress, I'm really talking about making yourself an environment for healing. You definitely want to be eating the right things, but it's about so much more than that. It's not just always about just the food, and that's what women sometimes do. Like, we try to control the food so much. We're like, we should just become more and more and more restrictive, and you just like end up not really seeing that much change. So you want to look at the whole picture. What's adding stress, and what's some small things that I could take away to take burden off of my body? Are electrolytes and trace minerals the same? Yeah, so electrolytes, the term electrolytes is just minerals. Electrolytes is just a marketing term that was created by, I think, sports drink companies, I want to say. But electrolytes are simply just the minerals that your body needs. And when you sweat a lot, or when you are really under a lot of stress, or you're not retaining minerals well, you need lots of electrolytes or just trace minerals, which are just your essential minerals. Do you ever test clients for Lymes? I personally don't. I can run those tests, but I don't really want to. Because they have to pay them out of pocket. I really encourage you to have a functional medicine doctor on your side, because we work really nicely together. Like, my goal is to take your lifestyle and dissect it and really help you with the nutrition and the lifestyle and those aspects. But I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to be a doctor. Like, that's a doctor's job to diagnose, treat you, run all those lab tests, and get those covered by insurance, because that's what doctors do. That's their job. And so I really encourage you to utilize a doctor for that. Lyme's disease is one of those things, you know, if you notice, there's so many viruses now, like HPV and Lyme's and EBV, that are, you know, becoming at the forefront of health and wellness community. But, you know, viruses have been around for a long time, you guys. And the problem with just focusing on viruses is you have to understand that it's a bigger systemic issue. When you have a low immunity or a low metabolism, your body cannot fight a virus. You become a very, a susceptible host. That virus sees the opportunity to proliferate and to take up residence, and this goes the same for parasites and bacteria and funguses and so on. And so you're a compromised organism. And so they can take up residence and party like it's 1994. And so the whole thing is not necessarily focusing on limes, but it's about focusing on your overall the health of your body in order to strengthen your body's own defenses, because fighting a virus by yourself on your own is so difficult. But if you let your body do what it was created to do, which is fight viruses and keep you healthy, it's called an immune system, it can do that without you even thinking about it and having to worry too much about it. So yeah, you definitely need to. Limes is a huge issue. When somebody comes to me with limes, they usually don't just have limes. They have EBV a lot of times. They have really, really compromised guts. They have small intestinal bacteria overgrowth. They have a subclinical thyroid issue, metabolic issue. Their stress hormones are high, which is keeping their immune system suppressed. And I could go on and on and on. So I don't even look at limes because I'm like, why would we even think about attacking limes when you have your organism is compromised? You have no ability to fight a virus. Why would we even try to fight a virus? You can't even detoxify correctly. And so that's actually dangerous. And so all these people that focus on like, I'm a limes fighter, I'm like, you don't want to be a limes fighter. Don't be a limes fighter. That would be like saying like, I'm a flu fighter. Like, I'm a flu fighter. I'm a cold fighter. Like, what? Your body knows what to do with a virus, but when it doesn't have what it needs, the nutrients it needs, maybe your mitochondria are dysfunctioning, you're not burning glucose properly, your thyroid's not working well, you don't have enough progesterone in your body to keep inflammation suppressed, estrogen's causing stress in the body. I mean, I can go on and on and on. You're not going to be able to handle a virus at all. So Lyme's is more of a, I guess, a systemic issue, and it shouldn't be looked at as one specific issue. You should be looking at the whole complex organ that is you and seeing where you can strengthen your defenses against viruses. And a lot of times the body can take care of viruses themselves. So that's just something to think about. And obviously I'm not a doctor, so I'm just giving you my opinion, but that's kind of what I've observed. Have you ever heard of formication? I have a burning itch in my shoulder and cannot figure it out. I've never heard of that. I'm gonna, whenever I hear something I've never heard about, I have to like spend a whole day researching it, so I'm probably going to. But yeah, that's so weird, like a burning itch in your shoulder that you cannot figure out. I've never heard of that. I'm sorry, that's super interesting. I just spoke with a health coach who seems good but advocates intermittent fasting for women at 16 hours. What are your thoughts on a fast that long? What are the hormonal implications? So a lot of people that are advocating for intermittent fasting are looking, so with anything in health, there's always two sides of the story, right? So the main benefit with intermittent fasting is a lot of people say it helps you burn fat, and it helps with blood sugar, and blah, 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 blah. The main thing with fasting is that you're not eating and you're giving the digestive system a rest. And remember how I just mentioned that endotoxins, when bacteria is digesting and you have a lot of negative or bad bacteria that create something called LPS or endotoxins or lipopolysaccharides, these substances are inflammatory. And so when you starve the bacteria, you do give your digestive system a break from these endotoxins, right? And then when you go back to eating, your endotoxins are naturally created. But the problem with fasting, you guys, there's a dark side. So on that positive note, yes, that looks like a good thing, right? If we just focused on those things like, wow, that's going to help balance my blood sugar and help with cellular inflammation and all this stuff. But then we look at the flip side and we say, wow, if somebody's in a hormonally compromised position, their liver cannot detoxify correctly or last. Remember, your liver's like a battery pack for the body, and so it holds a certain amount of nutrients to keep your cells functioning while you're fasting. But if your liver is compromised or your thyroid is compromised or you have already high levels of stress hormones, your liver cannot hold on to much nutrients at all. And so your liver is going to have to heavily rely on cortisol and adrenaline to raise those stress hormones in order to break down your tissues when it comes to fasting. And this is why fasts really, honestly, longer than 8 hours tend to put people in a very hormonal dysregulated state. Their cortisol levels are shooting through the roof after about 8 to 12 hours. And so, yes, in someone that is healthy, intermittent fasting, usually a healthy individual can go 12 hours with fasting, no problem. Even 14, maybe 16. But in someone that's hormonally compromised, you're literally forcing your body. Your body has two choices for fuel. It can either get fuel from what you intake, or it can make fuel by raising stress hormones and breaking your own tissues down. That's the only choices for fuel. It's either or. And so if you cannot sustain a fast because your compromised liver, your compromised thyroid, your compromised whatever, you are forcing your body to have to survive, and it's going into that survival state. So unless you are hormonally sound, you are somebody that can literally go hours and hours and hours without eating, no blood sugar crashes, you are not hangry, you're not moody, your libido's fine, your digestive system is fine, your sleep is fine, your hair's not falling out, you're not getting acne, then if all those things are good, then you can fast. But most people are not in that state. And so what a lot of these health coaches and nutritionists don't realize is that intermittent fasting forces the body to break itself down for food. And that can end up causing thyroid problems long term. You know, remember, hormonal imbalances don't happen in a day, you guys. They shift gradually. Your hormones shift slowly. And you might start to see a few symptoms pop up, right? You're a little bit more irritable than normal, or your hair's falling out a little bit more than normal, or you get more acne on that side of your face. Like, you're like, I wonder why. We always say like, oh, it just happened. No, nothing ever just happens. It slowly, gradually shifts until you're in a completely different hormonal state. And then that is why it takes so long to heal your hormones, because it's probably been happening for years. You just chose not to pay attention to those signs. Your body said, hey girl, hey girl, hey girl, hey, and you're like, nah, you're fine. Like, I'm just trying to lose weight. No, I want to make you smaller. Like, you're stupid. And every time you did that, you got more and more hormonally compromised. And so now you have to go back. And so intermittent fasting, in my opinion, is honestly not really great for anyone in a hormonally compromised position. Once you have a robust metabolism and a robust digestive system and all of that, no problem. But when you're hormonally compromised, you're forcing your body into a survival state. And if you do that regularly, you're consistently forcing your body into survival. Your body gets very confused. Your body's like, whoa, and tends to hold on to more fuel. And if you look at all these people that like all their success with intermittent fasting, blah, 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 you have to, like I always say, healthy weight loss is not always equal to weight loss. Weight loss, forcing your body to lose weight with adrenaline, is not how you're supposed to lose weight, and is not sustainable long term. And a lot of these people come to me after prolonged intermittent fasting or keto or both together, and their T3 levels are just trashed. They can't make progesterone, they can't even make estrogen. I mean, it's just like, honestly, you guys, for me, the reason why I talk so much about healing your metabolism and talk so much about the thyroid and metabolic health is because the keto and low carb and intermittent fasting community is completely ignoring that side of things. They're looking at, oh, well, this was a natural state for humans to be in. Yeah, literally when they were starving and surviving, they were in that state. Does that mean that it's a natural state of the body? Sure. The body had to adapt or it would die, right? That, of course. But does that mean that we want to consistently force the stress of survival onto our body? It's very funny to me because, you know, all these health and wellness gurus are saying like, you need to lower stress, right? You need to lower stress, but intermittent fast. And I'm like, those are literally, intermittent fasting is absolute stress being placed on the body. So they're placing all this emphasis on lowering stress, and I'm like, what does even lowering stress mean if you're restricting glucose from the body and you're intermittent fasting or forcing it to go prolonged periods without eating? Those are literally opposite things. And so there's no amount of stress you can lower that's going to make up for the fact that your body is in a survival state due to the fact that you're not eating enough nutrients, of the right nutrients, or you're not eating enough or regularly enough for your body to feel safe. I hope that makes sense. I never want to poo-poo on anyone. I just try to share the facts with you guys because I want you to be able to see through health and wellness BS. I want you to have like laser focus. I want you to be like, nope. Because when I was sick and when I was first starting my health journey over 7 years ago, I followed everything. If somebody said, you should intermittent fast for health, oh, I do that. If you should take this, I do that. And I started to realize that these people were not actually educating me about my body. They were actually educating me about the product that they were selling. They did something that would fit the narrative of them selling me something or getting me to buy something through their affiliate link or do something because it worked for them. And it wasn't really like, hey, you know, this is your body and you should figure this out for yourself. Love your nails, girly. Oh, thanks. I got them redone. And I was like, I had her like put them into an oval shape. And then I was like, I don't know if I like this. I'm more like a little bit more on the edgy side. And these are like little ballerina nails, but I can enjoy them for a couple weeks. I've been working on hormonal balance after coming off metformin and birth control last year. I finally got my period, woohoo! And it's lasted about a month so far, light flow. What are your thoughts? So usually the first thing that I look to when somebody is having like prolonged bleeding is either going to be progesterone or thyroid issues. Many times it's the thyroid issues first that should be checked out. I actually struggled with that when I came off birth control as well. I actually struggled with it before I was put on birth control, and that's why I was put on birth control in the first place. I had a 6-week period that never really stopped. It was like a light, watery bleed. And so now I look back, I just cringe because I wish somebody would have checked my thyroid as a 16-year-old girl. And I think that a lot of times prolonged bleeding or spotting throughout the cycle usually has something to do with low T3 or just overall thyroid dysfunction. It can also be caused by high elevated levels of stress hormone. The way that, if you can't go get a blood test, remember, the way that you can kind of track your metabolic function is just by taking your morning temperature, your oral reading before you move, before you get out of bed, anything, just taking that oral reading, seeing where you're at. If you're anywhere below 97.8, that usually points to suboptimal thyroid function. And then you would also want to measure 40 minutes after breakfast, because if you're in a healthy metabolism, a meal should speed your metabolism up. It should give your cells energy so that you can create heat. But if you are running off of stress hormones, and stress hormones are creating a elevated level of heat in your body, after you eat, you'll actually see your temperatures decrease, because once you give your body fuel and sugar, it actually will lower the stress response. Your body no longer has to use stress hormones to break down tissues for fuel. And so a way you can tell if you have high elevated levels of stress hormones is simply by taking your morning temperature, seeing where it's at, and then taking your temperature 40 minutes after a meal. And you would want to see your waking temperature 97.8 or above, and then you would want to see your temperature after a meal increase. But I would definitely look into thyroid issues when it comes to prolonged periods or spotting throughout a cycle. Also, when does Fully Nourished launch? Thanks so much for your knowledge and time. Yeah, so I said in a live on Wednesday that it's almost there. My assistant is in Europe right now. She's on vacation, and so I was going to try to launch it while she was gone, and I was like, that's probably not a good idea because I can barely handle things alone as it is, let alone a launch of a program. I know it's going to be really bumpy at first. I don't want to say really bumpy, but I know that like there's going to be things that need to be fixed and customer service that needs to be happen, and I want to be there for you guys and be able to offer like the best service possible. So she gets back on May 1st, and so I'm thinking that it's going to be sometime around that time. I'm about 2/3 finished, so I'm just kind of putting like finishing touches on it, finishing up some lessons, modules. I have to like upload it onto Teachable, which is going to be the website that I use. So there's like, I still have some I don't want to say some ways to go, but I have some things that I still need to do and get done for it. So it should be out in the next, 3-ish weeks or so. I'm going to give you guys a solid launch date soon. It will be a post. It will be a story. Like, I'm going to let you guys know when it launches. I'm not going to be like, it's launched. I'm going to be like, it's launched. I'm going to send emails, that kind of thing. I will make sure that you do not miss out on the launch of Fully Nourished. Don't want to go to the gyno. They've always pushed birth control in this situation before. Yeah, I know. It sucks. That's why I would check my thyroid, or you could do the temperature things. What's the best way to see if you're ovulating? The best way to see if you're ovulating is honestly to get a progesterone test 5 to 7 days after you think you're ovulating. But obviously I know that not every person can go get a blood test and not every person can do a Dutch test. So a great way to see if you're ovulating is to start tracking your temperatures. The best way to know if you're ovulating is to take your temperature every single day, and right when you wake up while you're still laying down. So you don't want to move around. And this kind of kills 2 birds with 1 stone, because you can help track your thyroid function, but you can also track ovulation. So remember that when you ovulate, you start to create progesterone, and progesterone stimulates thyroid function. So you'll see, and the thyroid will warm up the body, right? It's a metabolic hormone. It speeds up your metabolism. And this is why progesterone is so important for metabolism, and why birth control is so bad for metabolism, is because it completely cuts off your ability to make progesterone progesterone. And so, progesterone plays a huge role in thyroid function, and the thyroid is the regulator of the metabolism. So when you ovulate 24 hours afterwards, you're going to be creating progesterone, and so you're going to see a spike in temperature. It usually is about 0.6 degrees, but it can be upwards of a whole degree. And so if you're tracking your whole cycle, taking your temperatures every single morning, and you don't see a significant spike anywhere throughout the cycle, that's probably an indicator that you're not ovulating. But if you see a significant spike around like day 14 to 21, or even a little later, sometimes women ovulate, then you might be actually ovulating. But remember that when you get that spike, you ovulated 12 to 24 hours before. So the spike happens after ovulation. This is why if you're learning to track your cycles for birth control, you need to track regularly for a couple months to learn your cycles so that you know when you ovulate. Do you have a natural deodorant recommendation? I feel like I've been through so many and I'm trying to find something great so I can finally get my husband to change. Yeah, so honestly, like all my followers know I have like the natural deodorant is like the bane of my existence. It always stains my shirt, and I don't know if it's just because I have like big boobs, which means I have lots of armpit fat, or what, and they like rub my shirt a weird way, but I cannot handle natural deodorants that have like coconut oil in them. And then I have also like my armpits are delicate sensitive flowers, and so anything with baking soda is out. Like I get these horrible rashes. So I kind of went to a compromised place and I did the crystal deodorant. It's just a rock. It's a rock that you wet and you put on wet skin, and it feels like you're putting on nothing. It's not like normal deodorant, but I swear it works. And a lot of people like hate on me for it. They're like, you're not natural. And I'm like, well, crystal deodorant salt is made with natural aluminum chloride, and they're bigger molecules, so they don't really absorb into the cell. The biggest problem with the aluminum found in conventional deodorants is it's synthetic aluminum. It's actually created in a factory or a lab. It's not natural aluminum. And so the synthetic aluminum is very small particles and can actually absorb into the skin and into the lymphatic system, whereas the crystal or natural aluminum deodorant, it is made of aluminum chloride crystals, but they're so big that very few of them absorb into the cell. So yeah, it's not necessarily the most natural thing, but I'm sorry, like I cannot handle all my shirts being stained with coconut oil. Like it drives me bonkers. Plus, I don't find that natural deodorants work that great unless you're not like a BO or a stinky person. But if your husband sweats a lot, that's going to be a hard transition. I would recommend doing like a couple armpit detoxes together on the weekends. A great way to, you just use bentonite clay mixed with water, and bentonite clay draws things to itself. And so when you do bentonite clay pit masks, you're actually kind of detoxing the lymphatic system. And so a lot of times that is enough to actually make your BO really kind of non-existent. And remember that excessive sweating is your body just trying to get crap out of your body. And so when you're excessively sweating, that's usually your body's like trying to get that stuff out. And so then we put antiperspirant on, we're telling the cells, don't sweat, don't perspirate. And it's actually making the body hold on to something that it's been trying so hard to get out. And so when you just let the body get everything out that it needs to get out, you'll find yourself sweating a lot less. Hi, new here. Thanks for joining, Sarah. I completely understand you're legit. Just I was barely living for 8 years, now intuitive eating high good fats, lower carbs, in and out of ketosis, and I'm finally feeling incredible. Labs great, but I'm sure metabolic, I needed a lot more healing, but I'm 43. That's so wonderful. Like I'm so proud of you. That is so incredible, and what a wonderful story. Chelsea Perry, there's going to be a detox period when you switch deodorants. Try a bentonite clay mask. Yes, yes, yes. You're on point, girl. And what's driving hair loss? Insulin resistance? How can we become more sensitive to insulin? So hair loss is more of a complicated issue than that. There's so many people that want to just slap supplements on their hair loss, but you have to understand that hair loss itself is a metabolic issue. Your hair follicles themselves are very energy intensive organs. They have very high needs for glucose, tons of minerals, B vitamins, saturated fats, protein, and that is like, they're like little mini organs. You can almost think of them as like tiny little mini organs. And when your body is compromised, that really creates not enough energy to get to the hair follicle. It can really compromise the hair follicle situation. And out of necessity, your body has to really prioritize nutrients for more vital functions, vital organs. And so healing hair loss is not as much of like, how do I heal my hair loss? What causes hair loss? It's more like, where's the metabolic issue? What's going on here? Where are the stressors on my body happening? Why is my body feel so stressed and so devoid of nutrients that it can't even grow hair? So healing hair loss is not as much as like treating a specific condition, but it's overall decreasing inflammation in the body, allowing the body to process glucose more efficiently. A lot of times hair loss is driven by low T3 and high levels of stress hormones. So thyroid is underfunctioning, which is causing the hair follicles to not be able to metabolize nutrients properly. And remember, T3 helps the cell metabolize nutrients, but then if you don't have enough nutrients to metabolize, that's a whole separate issue. So nutrients and thyroid function are really the biggest things when it comes to hair loss. And then obviously you want to regulate your blood sugar, which is going to help lower those stress hormones. So it all kind of plays into each other, but really when it comes to hair loss, your goal is to really lower stress hormones, raise thyroid function, and get inflammation in the gut down. High reverse T3 with PCOS, but in range free T3, T4, and TSH. Yeah, so if TSH is above, remember, optimal levels for TSH is between 1 and 2. Anything above that in conventional medicine is still considered normal until you're above 5, but we know that optimally it should be between 1 and 2. Anything higher than that points to stress in the body. So optimal lab ranges mean nothing. The next thing is, if your TSH is still in range, you have to remember that cortisol can suppress thyroid function. So you always want to get your cortisol and adrenaline levels checked when you get your thyroid checked, because cortisol that's high can suppress TSH so that on a lab test it's normal, but in your body it's not normal. And so this is why doctors used to use temperatures and pulse to regularly diagnose thyroid issues, because tests are not that really accurate or reliable. Also, if you have a high reverse T3, that shows your body's under stress. So anything above 15 usually means that your body's not utilizing T3 properly, and that actually can be due to inflammation, not getting enough oxygen in the body, so just not breathing enough. Like, that's a simple thing, is just taking more deep breaths will help you convert and utilize T3. Not getting enough of the right nutrients, not having proper liver function. I mean, I could go on and on and on. So reverse T3 should be seen as your body's not utilizing T3 properly and needs stress taken off of it. I have hirsutism and high testosterone. Would the advice be the same in this case? Yes. So remember, like I said, I see patterns that hirsutism can be high in both women with high testosterone and high stress hormones that don't have high testosterone. And so it makes me wonder if high testosterone is really the cause of hirsutism. And I'm starting to see no, because here's the deal, you guys. If it was being caused by DHT or high testosterone, in theory, if you took DHT blockers, you would be able to see your hirsutism improve. Now, a lot of people say, well, I take spironolactone and it helps. But guess what? Spironolactone also lowers estrogen. And so I deeply believe that estrogen drives hirsutism, and then the estrogen causes inflammation and stress in the body, and estrogen also suppresses thyroid function. And like I said, when prolactin is high and thyroid hormone is low, a lot of times hirsutism can occur. A lot of people actually find applying DHEA topically can be helpful in reducing the appearance of hirsutism. I've never personally done it. I am like a hairy girl, but I have like peach fuzz over my whole body. Like, we're just being honest here. I am blonde, so a lot of my hair is peach fuzz. Now, I'm not saying it's not intense peach fuzz, because it is sometimes, like my lower back and my chest. Like, I'm like, wow, this is not normal. But, it is what it is. But I did start growing like black hairs in between my breasts, and obviously I have a mustache. And so, I have been wanting to try DHEA just to see how that helps. But a lot of times lowering stress and getting stress hormones down and getting prolactin levels in a normal range really does improve hirsutism. Because I've seen so many women get their testosterone down and take spironolactone and all this stuff, and their hirsutism doesn't really improve. And so it makes me think, I wonder if it's not even due to testosterone at all, because remember how I said that your testosterone raises as a reaction to stressors. A lot of times women have high testosterone and DHEA because it's protective against stress. Hypothyroid symptoms, and did detoxification tests with urine, and I'm not detoxifying well. What can I do to help detoxification and support the liver? Yeah, so the biggest thing when it comes to liver is like, what are you eating? That's the first thing. You need to be getting plenty of bioavailable proteins. You need to be getting plenty of healthy, highly absorbable carbohydrates. And then you also need saturated fats. So remember, polyunsaturated fats damage the cells in the liver, whereas saturated fats heal the cells in the liver. So it's very important that you know what types of fats you are consuming. And then after you get those main things, foundational things dealt with, then you can start adding things like B vitamins or taking grass-fed liver, or like things like milk thistle, beets. I have a liver detox guide on my website that's free to download, and it has a lot of tips on how to actually detoxify your liver. Also, coffee enemas are wonderful for detoxing the liver. I also have a guide on my website on how to do coffee enemas. So there's lots of ways to get your liver detoxifying, but a lot of times women are so focused. They're like, I'm drinking celery juice and I'm doing green smoothies and all this stuff. And I'm like, that's wonderful, but your body actually needs protein, fat, and sugar in order to function properly. And no amount of celery juice or smoothies are going to fix the fact that you're not getting enough protein. Hi, my period has disappeared again. I was bang on every 28 days for 10 years, and over the last year it's gone twice, and my hair is breaking and I'm not ovulating, but hormones seem okay. Could be stress. Yes, of course. So it's almost always stress. And a lot of times when people are like, my hormones seem okay on a test, I'm like, it means little. It means little to nothing, because remember that blood tests are a snapshot in time. That at that one moment in time, what was in your bloodstream was tested. And does that mean that that is an accurate representation of every single day, all day long? Probably not. So that's why I always recommend tracking your temperatures and tracking your pulses to actually see where your stress hormones are at. Like I said at the beginning of this Q&A, you can get a really good idea of where your stress hormones are at just by measuring your morning waking temperature and then measuring your temperature 40 minutes after a meal. Because if that meal raises your metabolism, that shows that that is actually encouraging metabolism. But if that meal lowers your temperature, that shows that stress hormones are playing a role in actually keeping you warm, and that eating that fuel actually lowered stress by giving your body fuel to burn. So that's how you can kind of tell if stress is playing a significant role. Have you ever heard of separating fats and carbs for weight loss but still including both in your diet? Thoughts on this? I'm not a big fan, just because like food combining is stupid, and second of all, it just becomes complicated, you guys. All these stupid weird rules are just so like, do you really want to make eating and nutrition your full-time job, really? Or do you just want to eat some fruit and some fat together and call it a day? You know, like, just have a meal, for heaven's sake. So, all these, like, tiny little caveats or, you know, weird habits and hiccups that people have, I get really annoyed when they actually, like, teach them as fact to people, because it has no scientific basis whatsoever. When you eat fat with carbs, it actually slows absorption, so it really helps keep blood sugar levels stable. When you eat a ton of carbs without a fat, you really end up like seeing your blood sugar just spike and then drop, and you're going to be hungry again very quickly. So I prefer combining protein, fat, and carbs for actually long-term sustainability, blood sugar balance, and just my own personal sanity. Like when we start to say like, oh my gosh, it's 10 a.m., I must eat my carbs. Oh my gosh, it's noon, I must eat my fats. Like it just gets like, what the heck is this? Like, is this real life? Can you talk about hormonal IUD and PCOS? Yeah, so I've talked about this quite a bit. I actually have a really very informational story on understanding the hormonal IUD. It's actually called IUD. If you go into my story highlights, you can watch that if you want to know the details, and I explained it really well. I sat down and really walked you through the facts. But the hormonal IUD, remember, is fake progestins, and the goal is not to shut off ovulation, but a lot of times it does, especially the first year you have it, since the hormones are so potent. And remember that progestins are not progesterone. So in the hormonal IUD, you're getting exposed to, I believe it's levonorgestrel. I believe that's the progestin that's used in most of the IUDs, Mirena, Skyla, whatever. And levonorgestrel does not act like progesterone at all in the body. It actually acts more like estrogen and more like testosterone. It has very similar attributes of both of those hormones. Nothing like progesterone, though. And remember, progesterone is, in my opinion, the most important female hormone you need to make sure you're making. And so many women on the hormonal IUD are not making enough to balance out the synthetic hormones that are wreaking havoc on their metabolism. So, in my opinion, I'm not a huge fan of the hormonal IUD, just because I've seen too much horrible symptoms happen with women, like, watching them transition off. I hate to see women suffer at all. And it kind of, when you have to experience that over and over with your clients that you care about, you really start to develop opinions about certain things. And I've just happened to develop an opinion about hormonal IUDs. They're sometimes just a horrible transition to get off of, which shows me that the body is detoxifying and having to compensate. Many times women on hormonal IUDs have a suppressed thyroid function. They have high levels of stress hormones. They're also experiencing really bad estrogen dominance symptoms. So they might not have bad periods because it's affecting the uterine lining, but they tend to have like sore breasts. They can get hirsutism. They see hair loss. They feel aggressive all the time. They feel anxiety. They feel depression. They feel also, it's hard to explain, but a lot of people say like, oh, you can't feel it. But do you really think like that inserting something is not traumatic for the body in a place where nothing's supposed to be inserted? And so a lot of women experience almost like an anxiety deep in their belly. And I'm like, that's actually in your womb. Like, that's what's happening. So, if it's working for you and you feel fine on it and there's no symptoms and you're ovulating, I wouldn't worry about it. But remember, PCOS is an ovulation problem. You need to make sure you're ovulating in PCOS because you need to be making progesterone. Progesterone is anti-inflammatory and pro-metabolic. It's also pro-thyroid. And remember, when you remove the thyroid from rats, they immediately develop polycystic ovarian syndrome. So we know that the thyroid plays a huge role in polycystic ovarian syndrome. And so you need to make sure when you're taking any kind of hormonal birth control that you are positive that your thyroid is highly functioning and there's nothing wrong with your thyroid. You also need to make sure that your stress hormones are staying low so that they're not suppressing thyroid function and breaking down your tissues. I hope that makes sense. So, there's just a responsibility. If you want to be on hormonal birth control, you just need to make sure you take on the responsibility of being on hormonal birth control. There's no right or wrong in that situation. And sometimes women do go on hormonal birth control, whether it's the pill or it's the IUD, because it greatly improves the quality of their life. And there's no shame in that. There's absolutely no shame in that. But if I was going to choose one method of hormonal birth control, if I wasn't going to do fertility awareness method or anything like that, I would not choose hormonal. I would choose a copper IUD. Just got done at eye doctor. They said a blood sugar imbalance could be to blame for my eyesight fluctuation throughout the day. Thoughts, how do I test blood sugar or keep it balanced? Yeah, so unfortunately that totally can. So because this fluctuating blood sugar can really, really cause issues. So what I would actually get just a glucometer, like a blood sugar glucometer, you measure your blood sugar. And I would test your postnatal glucose, or 40 minutes post-meal. You want to see how glucose is clearing from your bloodstream. If you have regular readings above 130, that's a sign that your body's having a really hard time processing glucose, and it's probably sticking around in the bloodstream longer than necessary. And this could be due to stress hormones, or this could be due to low thyroid function, low progesterone. Remember, there's a lot of components that affect your metabolism. And so this is why it's important to start tracking your temperatures and your pulse rate, because you want to actually start to see how the food you're eating affects your body, affects your temperatures. And I would probably recommend for a while to just eat 5 smaller meals throughout the day that are balanced with protein, carb, and fat, to see if that helps balance things out. But remember, low progesterone can also affect eyesight as well. A friend has a small focal autonomously functioning thyroid nodule, and the rest of the thyroid demonstrated lowered trapping. Doc recommended radioactive iodine ablation to kill the growth, but it could I'm sure she was going to say it could damage the thyroid. Any ideas of how to support the thyroid without this radioactive procedure? Yeah, obviously I encourage you to listen to your doctor, but I've seen so many horror stories where like one doctor just told someone that they needed to get their thyroid removed or they needed like radioactive therapy, and they never went to another doctor and got another opinion. And other doctors were like, why didn't you just do this? And they're like, oh my gosh. And it's too late because they got their thyroid, radioactive therapy on their thyroid, or they got their thyroid removed. So I've seen really bad stories with that. So I always recommend like doing extensive research and getting multiple doctors' opinions. When it comes to nodules, a lot of times it's due to high levels of estrogen, not detoxifying properly, or progesterone, or there's chemical exposure going on. So remember, the thyroid is really delicate fatty tissue, and unfortunately that means that a lot of toxins that we're exposed to, heavy metals, pesticides, inflammatory oils like seed oils like canola oil or rapeseed oil, soybean oil, what else? Like chemical cleaning products, hygiene products. A lot of those toxic chemicals do get concentrated in the thyroid. And remember, the thyroid is made up of small, tiny sacs. And that's why nodules can happen, is because these sacs can get really inflamed. They can get full of junk. I mean, the thyroid is just very delicate tissue. And so a lot of people do see benefits by actually doing like castor oil packs on the thyroid to kind of get that stuff to detoxify through the skin. And a lot of times like liver support really can help, but you have to kind of look at the situation. If it's a dire situation and the doctor's saying like you need to do this or else, you might be under a time, like you might have only a certain limited amount of time, and so you kind of want to weigh your options and try a few things, but don't be reckless and still listen to your doctor. Do you think raw dairy would be beneficial for Hashimoto's and acne if not intolerant to it? Yeah, I don't understand why people cut dairy if they feel fine eating it. Like, it's so nutrient dense. It's one of the most bioavailable sources of protein. It's easy to break down, and it's super rich in calcium, which is pro-thyroid and pro-metabolism. So I love dairy. The one thing you need to understand about raw dairy, though, is if you've gone a long time without consuming it, you're going to be intolerant to milk at first, because you lose the ability to create lactase enzymes if there's no need to make lactase enzymes, because there's no need to break down lactose if you're not eating it. So when you're reincorporating dairy, it can take sometimes up to like 3 or 4 weeks to stop getting symptoms from it. And so you would want to maybe implement it very slowly. Another thing with raw milk is you have to understand that like the time of the year, what the cow is eating at that very time is going to affect the bacterial enzymes in the milk. Just like when we breastfeed, we get different milk or different bacteria in our milk that affects our babies differently. Like, that's why sometimes babies get really fussy when we eat like a spicy food or something like that, because the bacteria in our breast milk has been affected. And so it can, cause our child's digestive system to be wrecked. And so if you have a really compromised digestive system, sometimes eating pasteurized or ultra pasteurized milk where there's no bacteria in it is still providing you the nutrients in milk, but it's not providing you the bacteria. And sometimes when people are really digestively compromised, they can tolerate ultra pasteurized milk a lot better because there's just no bacteria to disrupt the gut. The only thing you want to look for is you want to make sure that if you're getting more processed milk or ultra pasteurized milk, if you're not tolerating raw milk very well, you want to make sure it doesn't have any gums added to it or any synthetic vitamins. Like a lot of times synthetic vitamin D is added to milk, or like gellan gum or carrageenan is added, which are thickeners, but those are more of gut irritants than actual dairy itself. And then if you really don't tolerate cow's dairy, you can always try goat milk dairy. Sometimes it's tolerated better because it's from A2 cows, or A2, it's not from A2 cows, but goat milk has more A2 style dairy in it than A1. So there's a lot of caveats to dairy, and I think it's really overly demonized, but I think it would be beneficial for people with thyroid issues if they tolerate it fine, because it does have a lot of bioavailable nutrients in it. What have been the biggest noticeable changes since you've added back in natural sugars, fruits, and roots since coming off keto? The biggest changes I saw, well, at first my digestion was wrecked, you guys, like wrecked, because my metabolism had slowed down. And so when I started to tie in fruits and carbs, I'm not gonna lie, it was rough to digest those things. Like, I was seeing everything come out in my stool, and I still actually don't really tolerate consuming leafy greens any longer. And I've been just keeping them out of my diet for a while now, which is crazy because I've always had okay digestion, and then keto just wrecked my ability to digest plant foods altogether, which just shows, because remember, plant foods are just harder to break down than animal foods, because obviously you rarely ever see like a piece of steak in your stool, but you can see like leafy greens and carrots and sweet potatoes all the time. So plant foods are definitely more difficult to digest, and I did see a harder time digesting those foods, but so I've stuck to mostly roots and fruits, and haven't been consuming a lot of greens, which has actually been so incredible for my body, and there's a scientific reason for it. I'll be teaching that in Fully Nourished. But the biggest things I've seen is just more mental clarity, better libido, just happier overall. Like, I was feeling almost not depressed. That's the wrong word. It's just more like I was just not feeling like myself. Like, I'm a very driven person, I love to engage with people. I'm a get her done type of gal. Like, I'll just work. And I was not feeling that way. I was just kind of feeling like, hee ha. Like, I was just having a really hard time. Like, I wasn't feeling like myself. So by tying in a lot more sugars in the proper way, I've just felt more like myself, more energy, more mental clarity. I also have seen my appetite increase, which was the biggest thing on keto. Like, a lot of people see hunger or appetite as a bad thing, but in reality, if your body's not craving fuel, that shows that you're not burning fuel very much. And so that's the biggest change, is just having a voracious appetite and just like feeling more invigorated by life. I think that would be like the biggest changes I've seen after transitioning back to being a glucose burner. How many grams of non-refined sugars should we eat daily? The liver makes a certain amount so that the body is not starving. No. So the way that the liver works is that the liver can store up to 150 grams of glycogen or stored glucose, and so can the muscles. The problem is T3 is needed in order to actually store glycogen in the muscles, and so sometimes it doesn't really store. And then remember, if stress hormones are high, you're eating through that sugar very quickly. You're burning through it like in a snap, in an instant. It can take it only an hour. And so if you're not constantly refilling your liver with sugar, then your liver's usually empty. And this idea that the liver makes its own sugar is not the complete truth. The liver stores sugar, and then the liver can also take nutrients from the tissues to make sugar. So what happens is the body has to raise cortisol and adrenaline, which the main job of your stress hormones is to break down your muscle tissue, your collagen tissue, and certain glandular tissues, your skin tissues, to actually send those individual components that the tissues are made up of, usually amino acids, to the liver. And then the liver goes through a process called gluconeogenesis, which takes those amino acids and tissues and turns them into glucose, puts them back into the bloodstream so that the cells can use that glucose. So the process is very stress intensive. And so, the trade-off that is being made when you're not consuming glucose is this. If you're not intaking glucose, your body has to make glucose. And the only way the body can do that is by highly elevating the stress response. And the liver doesn't just make glucose out of nothing. It has to make it out of your own tissues. And glucose is very relative to the person. So a lot of times when I transition people off of like a ketogenic diet, they have such high needs for glucose because their body has been having to make its own for so long. Sometimes upwards of like 150, 200 grams of carbohydrates is needed, somewhere upwards of like 250 grams to just get their body out of that stress response. Of course that equals weight gain. We have sometimes people off of keto have to gain like 20 pounds to actually get their body like back to feeling safe again. So that transition can be slow. Sometimes, I recommend like if you're only eating 20 grams of net carbs, you don't want to go to eating 250 grams of carbs a day. You have to really transition very, 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 very slowly. Sometimes just simply adding some fruit to your dinner meal and taking out some fat to the dinner meal. You're just like slowly adding in some fruits and roots and taking some fats out. And everyone's very different. Some people just can't tolerate a lot of carbohydrates and do better on higher fats. That's okay, but you need to understand that you do need to eat carbohydrates in order to have optimal hormonal function. There's no ways really around that. So that's kind of the caveat. But remember, the question that you asked is really smart too, because the liver makes a certain amount so that the body is not starving. Yes, so eventually your body starts to create something called ketones because your body doesn't have any glucose to burn, and your tissues could only last so long, right? And so your body makes ketones, and ketones are a product of actual metabolic stress. So making ketones is not actually a great idea. And the funniest thing to me is, and I mentioned this in my live yesterday, it's funny that when we pee out sugar, we get diagnosed with diabetes, but when we pee out fat, we say it's called ketosis. That makes no sense to me, right? It just shows that we're not really burning fat very optimally, in my opinion. Okay, sorry guys. So Instagram's cutting me off. It's been an hour. I obviously always go live twice, and so I will go back on. If I didn't get to any questions, just join me again and ask your question. See you in a second.